states to be said that you have to stay in this union, even when you find the terms of that contract breached, creates in the Constitution an illegal contract. And what we need to understand as well is that this contract, again, was based on consent. In history, we don't teach that at our time of our independence, we actually invited Quebec and several Canadian British colonies to come in. They decided not to. We didn't take them over by force. We said, okay, we'll do this without you. And our founders, in the ratification of the Constitution, didn't ratify the Constitution by force either. They said, all right, we'll have this process. It takes 3/4 of the states to come to this agreement. Once we get 3/4 of the states, then the states that want to sign on, then they sign on. The misteaching of the perpetual nature of the Constitution is a quote taken out of context. The perpetual union is not to mean a never-ending contract. It's to mean that the unions of the states are perpetual, meaning that foreign governments and Great Britain cannot pull them apart. They are there because they have wanted to be together.
Well, you know, my father is a constitutional law professor, and I, being an attorney, had to, of course, take constitutional law. And,
which is quite often contrary to the Constitution itself.
Right, and so since we're talking about the Constitution, the other really incorrect doctrine and is this whole idea of being a living document, the Constitution, was just another way of distorting the meaning and just evading what the Constitution says.
The living, breathing document fallacy is antithetical to liberty, because what it does is it creates a totally and completely arbitrary style of government, meaning that the government is not limited in writing by a standard. The government is only limited by the current popular whim. And that's a banana republic. That's not a constitutional republic. The reason our Constitution was in writing was because our founders came from a specific type of government called a limited monarchy. So they were a monarchy, but their monarchy was limited by its power through 5 written documents. And they understood the power of having a limited and codified standard. So the government can't say, well, you know, we didn't agree to that and expand their power beyond the terms, or that's not what that really meant when we signed that. They lived that for 700 years. And so they said, no, we've got to have this thing in writing. It's got to be done through the consent of the representatives of the people and their states. And we have to make sure that the government is, not only is the government always on notice, but the people are always on notice of the limit of government power, because they said over and over again that the greatest guard was the vigilance and jealousy of the people towards their own liberty.
Well, Ms. Hall, you're doing a great service to the country.
Thank you.
And we really need you out there explaining the history. I know you have some other engagements, and I want to thank you again for what you're doing. I heard that you have a podcast. Would you like to?
Yes, we have a podcast. My husband and I co-host the podcast together, and we do that weekly. It's actually syndicated nationally across America. We have stations who carry us in Canada. We have internet stations that carry us in the UK. And we have listeners all over the globe, because we are dedicated not to politics and political parties, but to the principles of liberty, which are universal. And you can listen to the podcast if you don't have a station that carries it by going to my website, chrisannhall.com. It is published every Saturday.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hall.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
So you have a card so I can get everything?